Hello everyone, this is Jotto bringing you the limited format and my predictions for the next tournament, which, as I'm sure most of you know, will be limited format, which means no epics, no legendaries. I'll be talking about the top 10 cards that are no longer in the metagame because of this, top 10 cards I expect to see more of in limited, and my overall prediction for how the format is gonna look and what kind of decks will be played. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So, top 10 cards no longer in the metagame. Unfortunately, Sea Giant, most rejected epic card in the game in my opinion. He's got two brothers that are kind of bigger than him. Anyway, that's the list. Pause the video if you want to read it, but you're going to see it anyway, so let's get going. Big Game Hunter, on here for two reasons. One, he's a full 2 for 3, and he's so good he replaces Jungle Panther and Arcane Golem for that slot, so they really can't do anything. And two, even though legendaries and epics are the ones with all the high stats, so they're not in the format, so he doesn't kill much, he no longer discourages buffs. What I mean by that is if you silence a buff, it gets rid of it to 1-for-1 trade. If you Big Game Hunter a buffed minion, you 2-for-1 him, or 3-for-1 him, or 4-for-1 him, depending on how buffed it is, which makes buffing decks much more powerful because this guy cannot wreck your day. So, on to arguably one of the most hated cards in the entire game, Mountain Giant. 10-10, 12, meh. Oh wait, you can cast him on turn 4 or 5 in the right kind of decks. Warlocks have a lot of fun with this guy. Now, him not being here, along with his other cousin I will talk about next, means that you don't have to play as much single target removal and you can focus more on AoE removal. It also means that decks can't just go full control and then go like, oh, I'm going to put down this thing on turn 4 and then give it taunt. Nobody likes people who do that. But you won't see it in this format because it's epic. And then there's the Mountain Giant. Mountain Giant, slightly later in age cousin. Now, the reason Mountain Giant's on here is because it's one of the only ways Warrior can win in Standard, which is with the crazy Mountain Giant combo with Warsong Commander. However, this is no longer in the format, which means Warriors have to get creative specifically, but it also means you can't do crazy things with Warlocks anymore. Notice the trend with Giants and Warlocks, by the way. You also can't do things like lower your health with your own weapons so that you can smash him in the face for 10 consistently for free. I'm not sad to see those go. Illidan Storm Rage. We've seen this card so many times. 7-6 for 6 will always be good. His ability is why he's on here though. Between him and Hogger, no 6-drop can touch them. There's no point in getting any 6-drops or 5-drops in a deck that are neutral and that aren't legendaries because the legendaries in those slots are so powerful. In other slots, they're not that broken, but in these slots, they're really insane. So Illidan, kind of crazy. He won't be around in this format for obvious reasons. It's nice to see the diversity. And Hogger. Now, Hogger is the most played legendary in the game right now. And being the most played legendary in the game right now, a lot of people are going to miss him. Now, from my point of view, a 2-2 null at the end of every single turn is fine. Give it taunt, kind of crazy. Oh, it's on a 4-4. Okay, alright, so it's outside of all the 3 damage removal. So, yeah, Hogger and Illidan, they're gone, which means a lot more 6-drops can be played, and it gives a lot more diversity to the metagame. Onto the Geddon, the infamous Geddon. He's on here for one reason, and that one reason is, if you have Geddon, all you have to do is live until turn 7, and then you instantly win against aggro decks. That is all. Next. So, Doomhammer. Wait a second, Jotto. This isn't neutral. This is a Shaman card. Yeah, it is a Shaman card. I thought I'd diversify a little bit when it came to cards I expect will make a big impact. And the reason for Doomhammer being on here is, let's just say he single-handedly drove Harrison Jones into being played. Because if you leave a Doomhammer, it wins the game. You can't leave a Doomhammer. And this, even if you don't play Shaman, the threat of playing against Shaman in a tournament and losing to a Doomhammer is quite high. So a lot of people were playing counters to Doomhammer and some of the other weapons like Gorehowl, but Doomhammer was the most powerful one, along with the Jiraxis weapon, Blood Fury, which I'll talk about now. Jiraxis, oh god, where do I start with Jiraxis? Basically, he resets the game, he stops aggro from ever killing a Warlock if they live to turn 9, and he also summons 6/6s for 2. Now, Jiraxis is one of those cards which I personally think needs a bit of a redesign, but I'm not even going to go there. But he slows the pace of the game down so far, and then just accelerates it into insanity. What do I mean by that? I mean, on turn 7 to 9, your opponent doesn't want to burst you down, because they know you're just going to heal back up to 15, so they don't. So it slows the game down, and then as soon as he comes down, the game will end within about 3 to 4 turns. Either you kill them, or they kill you. Has to happen. That's why Jiraxis is on here. He was also one of the reasons why Harrison Jones was played so much. Speaking of Harrison Jones being gone means Acidic Swamp Ooze is better. That's all I really need to say, and it also means that there's less card draw in the format, which is fine with me. Now, last card is Sylvanas Windrunner. Arguably the best 5-drop in the game. Probably is the best 5-drop in the game. Means you can play more big stuff without being as risky and play less silence. I've already talked about Sylvanas. If you want to go hear my full opinion on that, go check my top 5 video. But besides that, nothing I need to say again, basically. So, top 10 cards I expect to see in Limited. Well, correction. Top 10 cards I expect to see more of in Limited. Interesting picks on this list, really. Something new. I haven't done this yet, which is nice. First card I'm talking about is a card which a lot of people didn't even realize was in the game, because no one plays it. Arcane Golem was a bit of a joke in the community until recently, because it gives your opponent a mana crystal. Now, normally, you'd think, oh look, gives your opponent a mana crystal, that's terrible. However, if you look at Wolf Rider, that's a 3/1 with charge, for 3. Yeah, it's a +1/+1 stats-wise on this thing. It's the same stats as Huffer. Yeah, and it's not random. There might be something interesting to this Arcane Golem thing. The crystal you might think is a huge drawback, and then you realize, without the legendaries and epics, there's nothing large to play. So, I just play my 4/2 with charge, for 3. Sure. Next card would have to be the Argent Commander, the other charge minion. This is one of the only things you can ramp your opponent into, basically, but Argent Commander was always good. It was overshadowed by things like Illidan, Hogger, Sylvanas, cards like that. Really powerful legendaries. But Argent Commander is insane. Like, you take away that stuff, you're like, oh, okay, he does 4 damage to target thing, and then hits you in the face for 4 the next turn. He also has Divine Shield, so if he just hits you in the face, you have to deal with him twice. And the charge is the crazy thing, though. Like, just the charge. It's the combination between charge and Divine Shield that makes this card good. Stats are a little mediocre, but it's more of a case of, if he has his Divine Shield, he's really hard to deal with. If he doesn't, he's pretty easy to deal with, but he has charge, so he still does his thing. So, on to the next card, Acidic Swamp Ooze. Now, there's only 2 things I need to touch on for this. 1, Harrison Jones is gone. And, yeah, so Acidic Swamp Ooze is better. 2, he's a 2-drop that kills all the early game weapons. Yeah, early game weapons get played a lot more now because their value in a very aggressive format. Things like Stormforge Axe and Arathi Weaponsmith, Arcanite Reaper. These are weapons that are being played now. Why? Because they give you value in a format with very, very few large minions. And Acidic Swamp Ooze deals with that stuff. I expect aggro decks to be playing Acidic Swamp Ooze because they need it. Jungle Panther, the other 4/2 for 3 that ended onto this list. Stealth was recently, well, not buffed, but clarified. So you can buff your own stuff if it's stealth. Now that's pretty insane, because for paladins and rogues it means that they can get a 4/2 for 3 on the field on turn 3, on turn 2 if you have the coin, and then buff it into oblivion. And that's something which a lot of people don't like. Turn 3 Jungle Panther, turn 4 Blessing of Kings, hit you in the face for 8. Sure. I quite like Jungle Panther. I don't know how much play it's going to see, but I think it is definitely at least a tier 2 card right now and could see play. Another card that has seemed to have jumped through the roof recently is the most powerful 5-drop in the game right now in this format, Stranglethorn Tiger. 5/5 for 5. That's already powerful because all the other 5 mana are 4/4s, basically Azure Drake and Abomination and things like that. Kazakhstan. This thing's a 5/5. Okay, it's a 5/5. It's also a beast, so it helps out hunters, and it has stealth with the current change to stealth. I expect to see this thing. If this thing is not around, I'll be shocked, because it is very powerful right now. It depends what class you're playing, whether or not it makes it into your deck, but the only thing that really competes with it in that part of the game is Argent Commander. It's an insane card in this format. I love it. Senjin Shieldmaster. Now, if you've been paying attention to the weekly shows recently, you'd know that this is played a lot in Standard. Now, what happens when you take a format and you take out a bunch of really, really powerful cards late game, and one of the most played cards is a basic? Answer? More Senjin Shieldmasters. Senjin Shieldmaster is going to be everywhere. I'm expecting it to get probably 4 decks top 8. It's my guess, 4 or 5. 4 is the highest amount we've ever seen of a single card. That was Illidan and Iron Beak that got that. But Senjin might break it. It's so good, and he's going to be played even more. Another card that's going to be played even more is Pyromancer. Now, what happens when you get Pyromancer in the Standard format? Answer, he wrecks mid-range decks. What happens when you get Pyromancer in a format which is about 3 to 4 turns faster? Answer, he breaks the game. Pyromancer is going to be mid-range. Mid-range decks are just going to play Pyromancer to deal with aggro decks because the format is sped up so much. They're just going to use Pyromancer to deal with this stuff. I'm pretty sure that any control in mid-range deck is going to have to run Pyromancer to deal with all the aggro stuff. And he's going to do work. That's my prediction for Pyromancer. Young Priestess, the 1-drop which everyone's been neglecting. Now the reason he's on here, or she's on here, sorry, is the +1 health gets out of Pyromancer trigger. It can help to suicide into Senjin because Senjin only has 3 attack. It can also help against AoE, which is a big deal in this format. And with the coin, you can play a 2-drop, like a Fairy Dragon, for example, on turn 1. And on turn 2, you can play a Young Priestess, and you end up with a 3/3 attacking Fairy Dragon on turn 2. That is very powerful. And suddenly, that 2-drop is out of AoE range. And that applies to all 3/2s for 3 in the game. And 3/2s for 3, 3/2s for 2, I'm an idiot sometimes. 3/2s for 2 is one of my favorite stat tools in the game, so anything that makes 3/2s for 2 good is okay in my book. So, Chillwind Yeti, Dorox's favorite card. Chillwind Yeti, the reason he's on here is because he's like the Boulderfist Ogre of 4-drops. Boulderfist Ogre is a 6/7/6. Chillwind Yeti is a 4/5/4. The difference is 1 health on a 6-drop isn't much. 1 health on a 4-drop is a lot. Unfortunately, he doesn't work his way through Senjin. Ancient Brewmaster is the one that does that, but I still think Chillwind Yeti is just good because he tanks a lot of things and he just does work and you get value out of him. He's one of the only vanilla creatures that is even playable because unlike all the other ones, he makes up for it in sheer stats. And 4/5/4 is tied for the highest stat total of any 4-drop along with Ancient Brewmaster being 9. So, Defender of the Argus, has to be the Argus, is one of the most defensive minions in the game, although not just defensive because it gives +1 attack as well. People seem to neglect that a bit. But anyway, he puts things out of AoE range, he gives them taunt for control in mid-range decks, he gives them +1 attack for aggro decks. He's just a really solid minion. I quite like this guy, to be honest. He's really, 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 really good. Just a bit overshadowed in some decks by some of the other 4-drops, Senjin Shieldmaster. But Defender does his job quite well, and I expect some people to at least try him out and maybe play him. So, my overall prediction for the format, it's going to be extremely fast because all the late game legendaries have gone, so all the guys are going to focus early, which means more aggro, less control essentially. I think most games will last between 5 and 8 turns. We had a mini tournament yesterday, and most of the games that were limited, it was a standard tournament, but some guys were playing limited. Most of the games being played by limited decks lasted about 6-7 turns. So yeah, it's really fast compared to the normal 11 or 12 turns we're used to. A lot of new strategies will be seen, and the reason for this is because there's less legendaries and epic cards that shut them down, like Doomhammer and Jiraxis, for example. It means you can do a lot more crazy stuff. That, and with the new stealth mechanic, it's going to be crazy, man. It's also a new format, so the metagame's going to be crazy for this one. Maybe if we do limited formats again, it might be, you know, more stable, but this one's nuts. And then Taunt and Charge are going to be insane. Why? Because aggro equals Taunt is better. Charge equals Taunt is worse because you can work around Taunt. And it's the vicious cycle, which ends up with a lot of things with Charge and a lot of things with Taunt. Also, cheap board wipe. It's always welcome, but in this case it's just going to be essential. You need the board wipes, you need them Consecrations and them Lightning Storms and the Hellfires, and yeah. You just need that stuff, otherwise you're going to get rolled over by aggro decks. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you want to get hold of me, you can either come on the TeamSpeak channel, I will leave the info in the description, or you can post on my forum page and we can have a chat about it. But anyway, this has been Jotto, signing off.